As we've been going along, I've been just trying to capture a little bit about what our speakers today have been conveying to us. I think it's been a fantastically varied and fascinating journey that we've been on since we started this morning. We started with Paul McGreevy, who talked to us about the importance of animal welfare and veterinary education. And there were a number of things, number of phrases that really came out to me in Paul's talk. The first was the idea that John Webster planted in Paul's mind at the beginning of his formation as a veterinary scientist: act according to that which is right, not to that which is regulated. I think we'd be in a much better place in Australia in animal welfare if that were the case of everyone that comes into contact with animals. I think it's a really exciting opportunity what Paul and his colleagues are doing in terms of embedding animal welfare into the veterinary curriculum so that vets can become the leading advocates for animal welfare that John Webster was hoping that they would be even as long ago as when Paul went to vet school. And he is older than me, so I can say that. I really like the fact that in this program, they are also making sure that vets, as Paul put it, take their own temperature on animal welfare as they progress through their veterinary degree. I think this is an important thing for all of us to do when we have contact with animals. It's very easy in a lot of different situations to become habituated to the things that we see day in, day out, whether it's in terms of our treatment to animals or sometimes our treatment of people. Just those things about, ordinary politeness we can sometimes forget. I think actually assessing how people, assessing how students are going in terms of their attitudes to animals is really important. So I'll move on to Jan, because if I talk about each person too long, we will not get to afternoon tea. So look, I'm just really appreciative that Jan Ferguson came along to talk to us about a really difficult topic. I know from my involvement in the Camel project, none of these things are easy. I've done a lot of work in pest animal management now, trying to lift standards and improve humaneness. There's a lot of hard questions, a lot of hard decisions that have to be made in that area. So I'm really grateful for Jan being so open about that. She talked to us about the scale of the problem with camels and the consequences for camels themselves if nothing were done about that problem. And she talked about the scale of the collaboration involved and the fact that I think it was a really good example of those words that John Webster said about acting according to that which is right, not that which is regulated, because the building animal welfare into that program was something that was a decision of the people involved from the very beginning. However, and this comes a little bit to what Andrew just talked about in terms of self-regulation not working in animal industries, the way they made it happen was actually to write it into every contract so that not a dollar of that money, that $16.4 million that was allocated, could be spent unless the contractors agreed to meet high animal welfare standards. And that was really at the essence of what Jan was talking about. She also introduced the idea of the reputation of an organisation being on the line when it comes to animal welfare, and that's something that some other of our speakers returned to. It was a great honour to be able to announce the Hugh Worth Future Leader in Animal Welfare Award today. We're very excited about that. In your programs, you will have had a flyer about that award. It's now open for entries. I encourage you to spread the word about that, about the Huey. I think we've definitely now named it, or at least Hugh has for us. Look, there were two things that Hugh said in his speech. What do we do for animals? Not enough. What should we do for them? Make their life worth living. And if anyone has really devoted their life to doing that, it is definitely Hugh Worth. We heard from John Hellstrom about why New Zealand has the policies it has, and why it is one of the first countries to have only today, in their new Animal Welfare Act, recognised that animals are sentient. It seems amazing that that is the case. Not that animals are sentient, but that it has taken so long for that to make it into New Zealand legislation. We're not even on that. I mean, we're on that journey here, but we're not close to it. I found it really interesting, the journey that John talked about in terms of that situation of growing up amongst animals, and I think that's something that really has begun to change in recent decades, that children do have less access, less obvious contact with animals other than domestic cats and dogs in the way that they used to, and a lot of the issues that we're now grappling with in terms of intensive farming have arisen because we don't see those animals anymore. It's clear in New Zealand, to me at least, that one of the key differences in the way that New Zealand has approached animal welfare policy is that from the very beginning, and I think this is, John has should be given a lot of credit for this, alongside the late David Bavell, that they integrated science right into the process from the very beginning. And that is, again, something that I think we don't do well here in Australia. So, moving on from New Zealand, we also heard from Terry Nolan, and I'd also like to say it was a very brave thing for Terry to come along and talk about the things that he talked about to an audience where he doesn't know how well some of these things will be received. But I think it's very important that we understand the standards and the shift that has happened in the meat processing industry over the last couple of decades in terms of introducing high standards here. And from the RSPCA's point of view, that is one of the reasons why we are so passionate about the idea of Australian animals being processed in Australia, because we know there is a framework here that has been developed with input from animal welfare organisations, with input from animal welfare scientists, and I'd also like to acknowledge the work that the late John Barnett did on that from the very beginning, in terms of starting the process of animal welfare audits in Australia, which has really led to a number of significant developments, including the way that the RSPCA approved farming scheme works in terms of auditing animal welfare on farm. Terry told us about his views on fishing, which I know have certainly sparked quite a lot of debate amongst the audience today. It is a very good question, that ethical contrast between stunned slaughter in abattoirs and what happens to fish when recreational fishers and commercial fishers capture live fish. He talked about how the control of the whole supply chain allows improvements in animal welfare, and he talked about the many meanings of pleasurable meat moments. I think one of the key things that came up again in Jackie Healing's talk is this link now between animal welfare and the reputation of industries, the reputation of brands in particular, how intrinsic it is, how important it is that what companies and businesses do and say about the way they treat animals rings true, so that when there is an issue, they are able to say, that's not the way we do it. It's a really, really important advance. So Jackie talked about the scale of the business she's in, the amount of produce that goes through supermarkets every week. The idea that, there are 1.5 million chickens weekly going through Coles supermarkets being bought by consumers. We are talking huge numbers of animals, and of course then small differences make big differences because of the numbers involved. we heard about how Coles spend a lot of money, millions of dollars, listening to what customers want. And this fact that customers expect retailers to do the right thing. I think there's a lot of expectation out there in the community that people don't want to have to always ask the question, how have animals been treated in the output in terms of the product that they buy. They want to know, just by virtue of the fact that that animal has been reared and slaughtered in Australia, they want to know that that means they've been treated well. And that's where regulation has such an important role. Jackie also talked about the costs of getting it wrong and how devastating that can be, and how I was very glad to hear that RSPCA standards are leading to real animal welfare outcomes and better quality for the products that Coles are selling. And I thought it was really interesting looking at those principles that Jackie talked about in terms of the lifetime traceability, long-term contracts, all of these things that when you're investing in producers to be able to supply you with a high-quality, high animal welfare product. It's clear that Coles are still on the journey. We have heard many times today that animal welfare is a journey, not a destination. We still have ways to go on that journey. Prue gave us a very interesting presentation and really a video that no one can fail to watch and well up when you see it, the things that people will do because they respond to animals in need. But how important it is that we focus on compassion, empathy and ethics in our teaching of children right from the very beginning, whether it's preschool education or school age, and how important the classroom is as a platform for discussing our treatment of animals. I know that my own children do a lot of debating. My partner is a debating coach, and the number of animal welfare-related topics that come up in debating is very high. Students want to talk about these things, and I'm constantly amazed about how well-informed many of them are because they care about these issues. They've done their own research often. Prue also talked about the separation, and particularly in urban life, between people and animals, that I think is making it harder for us to sometimes make that connection. But obviously, there is still that human-animal bond is so strong that it certainly never goes away. She also talked about the concept of effective altruism, doing the most good we can. And I think that is something that certainly I will go home and think about more. Andrew Wilkie, thank you. I'm very happy to hear that the RSPCA has got the balance right. That's something that I know I struggle with all the time. It's a very difficult space to be in sometimes because we are dealing with the use of animals in so many different contexts. And to actually understand that if you don't make a decision about this, if you don't step in and talk to those industries that are farming or those industries that are using animals in research or wherever animals are used, if you don't step in and actually work with improving standards, you're not making a contribution to the lives of animals being affected in those areas. And that's something that the RSPCA does every single day. It's really interesting to hear how big animal welfare is in terms of a topic for the public and how as soon as Andrew entered public life, there it was in the mailbag. So it's really obvious to me how important animal welfare is to the Australian public. It's really concerning to me and to the RSPCA that we do seem to be in a situation where government is out of step with that public opinion. And there is a lot more that needs to be done on the journey from where we were to where we're going in terms of animal welfare. But I'm sure that we will all go home tonight with the clear view that animal welfare matters to a great many people in a great many ways, and that journey is something that we will be continuing on for some time. I've got my timekeeper telling me my time is up. You've been a really fantastic audience, so I'd like to thank you for that. Some great questions, very well behaved, which is wonderful. Not much dribbling at all. I'd like to thank all the speakers today. I think you've all done a fantastic job. It was a really difficult ask that we gave of you. Often standing up and talking about issues is hard enough, but when we're asking for that personal touch too, you've done a great job there. I'd really like to thank the RSPCA Australia team. You've seen them around at the registration desk holding microphones, filling up water jugs, whatever they've been doing today. They've been doing a fantastic job, as they do. They are a fantastic team of people to work with, and I'd like to acknowledge that whenever I can. Particularly Melina Tenson, who's sitting right up in the top corner, who has done most of the organisation behind the scenes for today. As always, she's a very organised person, and I think it's shown in the smoothness that things have run. And I'd like to wish you all a safe journey to wherever you're going, and see many of you tomorrow. So thank you.